Good evening. Welcome to the fifth meeting of the Citizens Government Review Committee. This is a body created by the Topeka Mayor and City Council to take a look at the structure of the city government and make any recommendations for changes, adjustments that we feel are appropriate. Megan, did you call the roll?
Okay. All right. Chair Kopp.
Here.
Connie Jacobson.
Here.
Brian Brocksterman.
Here.
Champagne Lloyd.
Here.
Tamara Martin. Here. And Zachary Surratt.
Here.
All right. We have 6 present.
Okay. We take a look at the March 5, 2005 minutes, and would ask for any corrections to the minutes. I do have one before there's a motion to approve. If you look at page 15 of the minutes, just below just halfway down, the paragraph that begins, Director Glaude reported the Community Engagement Division serves as the education gap. I think that probably should say serves to bridge the education gap. I think they're part of the solution, not part of the problem. So. Committee okay with that change?
So if there's no objection to the change, then it would simply be to adopt the motion as amended. So to adopt the minutes as amended.
Yeah. Is there a motion to approve the minutes, the March 5 minutes with the change that just mentioned?
Right. I move to adopt the amendment or the minutes of the March 5th meeting as amended.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Megan advises that no one has approached her office to want to make a public comment tonight, but we do have at least one individual that came in. Sir, do you intend to speak to the body tonight? Okay. So at this time, it doesn't look like we're going to have any public comment, but somebody might arrive later on. I'd like to take just 1 minute. As you know from the previous meeting, Connie, our vice chair, made a couple media appearances since the time of the last meeting to get word out about the committee and its mission and to try to encourage folks to come in. So Connie, can you give us a little
Sure.
report on that?
The very first thing, I'd like to go on the record for giving the Washburn men's basketball team, the Ichabod men,
Yes,
a
yes.
shout out for the victory last night. They're in the Final Four D2 Division II championships.
Great game, great
Go
game.
Bucks. All right, so last Tuesday I was on the red couch for WIBW, and it was a brief interview, like, what is the committee? Why does it exist? Who's on it? What are we looking at? And I, said, let us know. cclerk@topeka.org is the website. Just let us know, talk to us, kind of thing. That's kind of how it was, right? Yeah. And, oh, sorry. And then Thursday morning, I was on the Fox 43 morning show. More of the same. And both times they asked like topics that we've already discussed, and I referred to, we've had a couple of emails mentioning like at large. Council members, I think in the email there was like the staggering of the mayor council elections. So like this fall, if you're an odd number council member and you're running for mayor and you'll lose, if you lose the mayor, you'll lose your position as well. You can't like finish a term. So anyway, am I right? That's come up in a letter or something like that. So I mentioned those. 43 asked how long, they both asked like how long we meet. And they also asked like, will we be part of the group next go round? And I'm like, well, that's 10 years from now.
Sure.
And we're free to do so, but I have no idea right now. So anyway, that was it. Short and sweet.
Was there a call-in for either program, or was it just a straight interview?
It was just an interview, just the two of us sitting here to chat.
Okay. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much
Sure,
for
sure.
volunteering to do that. That's found to be helpful. With the committee's approval, we need to make an adjustment to the sequence of the agenda. Zach, you want to explain why?
Pretty simple. So we've got technically three guest speakers tonight. We want to make sure that we get enough time with them and are cognizant of the time they spend with us. We also have some discussion items that they might be able to help us with when we start talking about some committee recommendations. So I can't make a motion, but I would highly recommend that we make a motion to move agenda item 5 guest speakers to in between 2 and 3, which would be now.
I so move. Then we adjust, as Zach just mentioned.
I second.
Been moved and seconded to make the adjustment to the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And with that, our first speaker is Juliet Abdel, who is the president of the Greater Topeka Chamber. So welcome to the committee, and you can either here or here, your choice.
Well, I'll join you, so I feel like it's more
Sounds
of a
like here.
conversation style.
And thank you for coming.
Of course, thank you for having us, and thank you, Connie, for going on the news. I did take a moment to look back on some of the videos, previous recording sessions, so I can get an idea of who you've had and what you've heard already, and was able to find some of the news coverage that you've had. So.
Okay, you come informed.
A
Great.
little bit, right? Enough to be dangerous.
Okay, we'll see. Do you have prepared comments, or would you?
I'm
prefer to-
happy to respond and then maybe kind of go from there if there are additional. I do have some notes that I can reference at a later point, but I'll give a little bit about who I am and the organization that I represent to
Yeah,
give
please.
somewhat of a perspective. So as you've just shared, I am Juliet Abdel. I'm the president of the Greater Topeka Chamber of Commerce. I'm also the senior vice president of the Greater Topeka Partnership. So here in Topeka and the Shawnee County region, we have an entity known as the Greater Topeka Partnership that exists for economic prosperity in the entire region. And it's made up of 4 individual organizations, so you can think of that as separate boards, budgets, bylaws that all kind of join together underneath that umbrella. Those individual entities all support economic and community development to some capacity. That includes the Chamber of Commerce, which focuses on government and regulatory support, international trade, and problem solving for area businesses. Go Topeka, which is our economic development arm. Think of that as primary company recruitment, retention expansion. Those are the site support visits that they provide, incentive opportunities, workforce development, and childcare. We have Visit Topeka, which is truly to support existing residents with things to do, places to shop, dine, and do business, and similarly to attract conferences, sporting groups, and individuals to come to our community to experience it with the hopes, of course, that they can keep coming back as tourists or choose to make this their home in the future. And then the 4th entity in that mix is the Downtown Topeka, which is generally your main streets. Think of that as the lifeblood or the heartbeat of any community. It spurs small businesses and entrepreneurship, but that entity exists so that they can support those area businesses. Again, by providing them guidance, stakeholder gatherings, hearing their input on health and well-being and their overall needs to continue to move their individual businesses forward. So that's the lens that I'm coming to you as. Now, the Chamber of Commerce, when I mentioned that we're government affairs and regulatory support, we lobby for economic development, tourism, and business interests. So generally, when there's an opportunity to be the voice of business or be in the room to represent business, it's the Chamber that's bought into that dialogue or hosts and convenes focus groups and stakeholder gatherings. That was a lot. So now I'll pause to see what you may have to kind of bring forward and maybe digest some of what I've just shared.
Well, I'll go Zach, go ahead.
Well, I before we get too far into it, I also want to highlight that Juliet has come to us, I guess it's been over a year now, but from other communities, and so she's had experience in government relations in other communities and other states, and so I thought that you would be a great conferee, we want to say, for our group when you've experienced government relations in other cities as well, so I imagine that we'll touch on that. So.
Sure. Well, thank you. Yeah. And Zach knows how to sneak into my calendar and make sure I'm somewhere, so I appreciate you getting me here.
Well, at the risk of sounding like a pessimist, Okay, can I just try to jump in? You talked about facts and figures and looked at what we've done before. I've lived in and around Topeka since 1979, before you were born, okay? Way before you were born,
I
right?
couldn't tell.
Only before your parents were born.
You wouldn't be too sure about that.
All right, okay.
The youngest of 6.
Okay, well, here, I'll get to the pessimist part.
Okay.
You know, the Topeka, at times is a hard sell. That's a difficult job, I think, that you have, and your component organizations have. Just a little bit of facts and figures. Topeka has had an increase in population of under 2,000 since 1970, when the air base emptied out. You know, that's 50 years ago, you know, 55 years ago. That's very, very slight growth. And I guess my first question related to population is that when a business approaches you, prospective new business approaches you, or an existing business talks about expansion, is population of the community, how does that come into play? It doesn't sound like it's a positive for a prospective employer.
Yeah, I don't think that's pessimistic. I think that's somewhat misinformed sometimes with data.
Okay.
And I will say that, and not to discredit what you're referencing, but sometimes it's easy to just look at markers of here's where we were in a particular year and here's where we are today, and that doesn't look like there's a change. But if you look at just last year alone, of all the counties that actually grew, it would have been Shawnee County. So that already is anti-perspective of there's no growth when you're considering where is the growth that's happening in the state of Kansas. You can also look and track existing companies that are around in our community and supportive jobs that they've created. And the number one investment that we look at isn't just attracting new businesses here, but it's the existing businesses and expanding and allowing them to grow their footprint. JADO, which is underneath, managed by Go Topeka, has a number of those transparency meetings on a quarterly basis. By the third quarter of last year alone, it was over 300 types of jobs that were available. Now, I'm throwing that out there because, again, my wheelhouse is policy, and generally I'll come prepared with what I need to know to address that conversation in a room. But we have a data analytics individual that can definitely bring to you some data and figures that are contrary to those types of remarks. Most recently, you may have seen us in the news for a lot of our wage growth that we've had in the last year. We've ranked in the 7th nationally for that wage growth. So that's pretty tremendous. So it's not a tough sell. I think the biggest challenge for Topeka is its own people. If you want change to happen, you have to have that mindset of it's an opportunity. Something that we have in our community is an opportunity to look around and see what our community is already doing, where they've succeeded and where they've failed. Because I can tell you today, economic developments today is different than when you were back here in 1979, right? It continues to change. There's numerous factors that play into why a company would want to locate into a community. Population is a part of that equation, but there are other factors. There are things like quality of life. There is a pro-business environment. Regulation is considered. Taxation is considered. How friendly is the business community? How easy is it to work with your city and your county? All of those are reasons for why a company would want to be here. One thing that we're spearheading from the chamber lens, we have a number of different programs and initiatives. One of those is the partnerships that we maintain with existing communities around us, like Manhattan, Emporia, and Lawrence. We've actually branded it as METL, METL, representing all 4 of those communities, and we share in regional priorities at the state level and federal priorities as well that we see need to be enhanced or as opportunities for us to make our businesses flourish and the overall communities flourish. One priority that we've already started working as of late last fall is to have all of our MSAs join together and work together as a united MSA. Now, that wouldn't take away from us being individual communities, being able to access our resources, but from an economic development standpoint, it's a lot more powerful when you have nearly 600,000 in population to attract a potential project to our area.
Okay, let me take another shot at it.
Okay.
And I appreciate your comments.
Sure.
Okay, and I do. The population of the area, the Shawnee County, has increased. That the unincorporated part of the county has grown much faster over those years than within the city limits of Topeka. But what I think we're most interested in is, I mean, you have private organizations, private sector organizations, JADO's in there as well, off to the side here. But what I think would interest the committee is to know how your organizations interact with the city government. What is a collaborative efforts?
Sure.
What's going on? Is there more that could happen that would go towards improving the economy, wealth of the community?
Sure.
And I mentioned population, which is an issue. I think it is an issue if you compare Topeka to peer cities. But the other thing that is very close to me, a topic that I've worked on, is housing. And it's, I guess, the same question. I mean, the city has done studies that show a pretty dramatic
Right.
need for housing across the board, affordable workforce, all the way up to luxury. There's shortages. How does that play into, again, decisions that folks make, businesses make to locate here or to expand if they're already here?
Okay, so you've asked a couple questions in that one statement.
Right.
Let me peel it back a little bit, right? So our organization is private sector. Our entities are differently funded. So some of us are funded public sector, some of us are private sector. The Chamber of Commerce is purely private dollars. That's why we do lobby and speak on behalf of businesses. We're not receiving any funds. To that end, we have priorities that rise from our business community that we utilize in our legislative agenda. Some of those you just spoke to. So housing is one that we benchmarked by asking a number of our stakeholders before this legislative session, what do we want in housing? Do we want more affordable housing? Do we want more apartments, single-family dwellings and units? And the overwhelming answer was very similar to what your remarks were. We need a diversity of a little bit of everything, right? Because when you have more homes that are available, then some of those that might be in between in a condo can transition into those homes. Then those that are in apartments can move into a condo, and those that are not able to afford an apartment can move into an apartment. So the full spectrum of housing, of course, is something that we would like to see continual growth in. The other item that you shared was...
Well, before you get off
Yeah.
housing, because I'm sorry, folks, but
Yes.
it's a really important topic to me. I think it's really critical to the community. So don't lose your train of thought.
Yes.
But...
Put a pin in it is what you're telling me, right?
Put a marker down. Ms. Abdul, the question becomes, just on your last point there, how and when do the interests are they integrated, linked together between the city's efforts? You got a land bank, you've got the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, you've got Topeka Housing Authority, you've got the planning department here, the development services. Everybody touches on housing,
Right.
more or less, and I think there is some level of coordination on the city side, but how does the chamber or any of your other component organizations, how do they interact towards that end of saying we need more housing?
And just because it's not something that we do, it doesn't mean we don't have that overlap. So to answer your question, I think that, let me pull that pin back out because it'll answer this question for you, and that's we have a very strong relationship with our city and our county. So even though economic development I just shared was primary company, our economic development is hand in hand with a lot of the city's development efforts as well. So they're aware of some of those residential projects and everything that they've considered. When it's a project that's located in a particular part of our community, which there's been discussions in some of our downtown or surrounding area, then that entity will activate around that project in particular as well. So we have open dialogue with our city, not just our city manager, our city mayor, all of our city council members as well. We regularly visit with them. We also regularly have opportunities for the business community to visit with them as well. We know that we have an overall voice, but we want those individual instances to also be shared with them on a as frequent basis as possible. So hopefully that answers both of those questions for you.
If I'm a chamber member,
Sure.
and I'm in the housing business, and I want to build apartment houses, and I have apartment houses, and I want to build more, and I sit down and come to your office and talk to you about it. What do you do with that contact? You send me over?
Right, it depends on what the project is. So for example, I've had an affordable housing project that had experienced some difficulty to some degree. I sat down with them and tried to get an idea of what the difficulty was. They had already begun having that conversation internally with city staff to get those answers for themselves. But it just depends on what their needs are, and that's where the regulatory support, we like to call regulatory support, isn't just filing documents and adhering to OSHA or HR or any of those. It's also liaising with those agencies for them at city, county, and state level. An example of that could be KDOT and the Polk Quincy Viaduct project, right? And seeing some of those closures that have happened along the roadways. Some of those businesses experienced dramatic shifts in how their business runs or operates, maybe having to relocate or move, and some of them ran into challenges with trying to recoup either the funding or finding a different location and things like that. So liaising with KDOT and trying to get them either to connect and have some sort of an answer that's provided back and forth was one of the ways that we supported them. So it's really unique to that particular need that the business has, and that's where that problem
I'm going to shift gears, and then other people are going to have to ask you questions, okay? I was interested, you mentioned that you coordinate, or you communicate with Manhattan, Lawrence,
Yes.
and cities in the area, both of which have city manager forms of government and have had for many, many years. Do you, at the risk, I mean, we want to be candid here, so in terms of
The stirring the pot over here.
coordination, communication, facilitation. I know you work mostly in Topeka, but you're aware of what goes on in other communities. Does Topeka compare favorably in terms of the city government, in terms of its responsiveness, its commitment to improving the economy?
I would say they're very open to feedback on anything that we hear or we're aware of. So I'll give an example of construction. I keep going back to construction because apparently that's been on my mind. But some of our businesses experienced a dramatic decline in their revenue whenever road construction was happening. Now, we believe that the primary core purpose of government is in three capacities. One of those is infrastructure investment in protecting and maintaining our roadways. So we love seeing those signage pop up and experiencing those potholes no longer, on our tires and things like that. But we also realize that some of those businesses have experienced that decline. And so trying to solve what was that particular decline, well, that resulted in our city manager coming out in addition to our director of public works at the time and having that conversation with those impacted businesses to hear what could they do, not only for that particular project, but moving forward, what could they have done to allow for those businesses to pivot before they experienced that. So they're very receptive to it. I would say out of many of the communities that I've been in, Zach alluded to this, so this would be the third community that I've worked in the capacity of community and economic development. Not all of them are very favorable to hearing what businesses want, or truly if they hear it, they don't really care. And so what I can say is one of the ingredients to what makes Topeka great, in my opinion, is that you have city, you have county, you have our private sector working together on a consistent basis and trying to answer one another's questions and be a resource. I got a phone call probably about an hour ago that was from one of our county officials and was sharing, hey, this is coming up. Have you heard something about this? And I was able to answer it. But if we weren't in constant communication, we wouldn't clear up if there was a remark that's being heard in another capacity that's not right. So it does matter that everyone is aware of what's happening, that everyone's accessible to each other, and that we know that we're in it together.
Is the city manager your main point, is the city manager's office your main point of contact with the city, or do you deal with departments?
It depends on the departmental issue, but often I'll go to the city manager or city mayor.
Okay, I'm sorry. Questions?
Juliet,
Chippy.
Yes, ma'am.
in terms of city governance with business economics here, is the city, is it a difficult task to bring someone, I'm talking about like permits and all the regulations and all that. Have you found that our city way of governance, does that impede us from bringing people in? Or is the way the city is governing that aspect okay in business?
My understanding is that it's okay in business, and this was a topic I looked into a little bit more because at the state level, they actually had come out with a policy that would have, so the measure had passed through, it was trying to simplify that permitting process, and it actually had a specific start and end date. So you'd have to notify if someone filed for a permit within 60 days, then you'd have to detailed out the specific number of days. Well, when I decided, is this something we want to file? Because for us, we want as quick as, time is money when it
Right,
comes to
right.
business, right? So if I'm a developer and I consistently have these applications that I'm filling out, I'm waiting for someone to respond to me on projects instead of taking a year, it could take 3 years, then it discourages me from continuing to do business. So we did look into it, and it looked like we already had that fast track system that was happening here in Topeka. So it wasn't a bill that we
Okay.
went out of our way to support because it already existed here and was already in place.
Okay.
You go for it, I've already talked. so
Um,
I'll always
Thank you,
have questions.
Juliet.
Yes, you're welcome.
Appreciate this. So in your experience through the municipalities that you've had experience with, sounds like a lot of things are going well for us here in Topeka. But do you have any suggestions or what has worked in other communities that you would like to see us look at?
So I'll probably say, and I know you had the city manager in here and you all were talking a little bit about affordable housing. You also talked a little bit about the sales tax initiative and some other things like that. I would probably say as we continue those types of conversations, another part of government is that transparency and accountability piece to taxpayer to the communities that we have here. So having more of a thorough understanding for taxpayers, I think, is always more important than you're going to raise taxes. If people understand where things are going and why they're happening, I think they're more receptive here in Kansas, right, than in most communities. And so I would hope that as that conversation continues, and we've had that dialogue, as if and when that comes back up, that we want the other entities that are taxing entities that are here, the business community that's at the table. So we're coming up with that solution that's there, knowing that it might not be fully supported by the community. But if there's education, now they're starting the line-by-line budget, understanding the budget process the city council is. I don't know how much of that is going to be residents also informed in the process, right? Like, are we around when they're going line by line to understand it? I think that's also something to consider. So that would be an area of recommendation.
Follow-up questions. When you talk about taxes, you're looking at just the basic two, the sales tax and property tax as well.
Correct.
Correct?
Now, the sales tax that they were referencing, that was for an increase in sales tax. And it was initially, when they had discussed it, was because of this proposed deficit that's going to happen over the next year.
Okay. So that issue, tell me if this is not, you can't talk about it or not. So the sales tax piece of that discussion, is it a short-term solution, if you would, for the deficit, and there's a beginning and ending point?
I think one of the things that we will hope to see right now in this process, since that's kind of been paused, is what has the city been able to do in that interim to try and address that. We've seen them come up with a hiring freeze, right? Let's go line by line and see where the drastic changes may have happened over the last several years from where we've had a surplus, what contributed to that, to where there might be a potential deficit. I think other factors are things like, is there opportunities for collaborating more with our county on select services, right? Do we need to consolidate on our courts? Are there certain elements that it makes sense for us to work together a little bit more closely than having the existing services that we do have? And then outside of that, then we can start addressing, okay, now that we've done all of the work that we have, what is the ask to our community members? I think that will help answer, is this a sustained thing? Is it something that's temporary? And then how is it worded, right? Like, for what purpose is that particular tax going toward? Is it going toward that one item that's causing that deficit, or is it going toward a way that you just offload dollars and then you free it up for something else, and then you find yourself in that similar situation later on?
So, okay, one last question. As you're talking,
Sure.
So in regards to our current, the city deficit and solutions, I'm assuming there's a conversation to avoid it in the future and future solutions as well. I'm guessing, I'm hoping.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
And there was, I'll reference and I'll push folks to look at a few different recordings if you have the time to just kind of go back. But around November, December was where the initial presentations may have been made to the governing body of last year about the deficit and looking at some dates back. And then around the February time period was really when some of that robust discussion happened and whether or not they would be moving forward with a special election in April. And probably around the second week of February, maybe before the 11th was when they had decided to pull that off.
I'd like to shift to a topic that we've talked about a little bit that you might be kind of an area expert in, and that is elections. So most chambers get involved in elections. I know that Topeka Chamber has always been close with campaigns and with elected officials. We have talked about, and we referenced it earlier, the possibility of changing how our governing body members are elected and who are elected by how many. We've had people suggest that we need to cut our number of governing body members and have some at-large and some district representatives. We've talked about shifting things so that maybe there's an election every year for 3 city council people at a time, and serving 3-year terms, things like that. Do you see any benefit from the business community or any economic development where changing any of our current election systems or current how it's set up? It's not really a system, but changing any of those would change any representation or benefit the community in any way?
I think when you touch anything with elections, you're going to affect the community in some capacity, right? My initial community that I was in was strictly by district. The second community I was in was strictly by large. And now I'm kind of back to the by districts, right? I see the advantage to both, right? I can always make the arguments. That's also part of being a lobbyist. You've got both sides of it, right? Even though you serve a district, you're also supposed to still be thinking of the community as a whole. And I think sometimes it's difficult when you are running for a particular district to have that full scope. But I also think that if you're at large, then you're not taking into account what your particular area might be experiencing or facing or feeling more like a mama bear to protect them, right? Like you get protective over getting those priority items done. There is a benefit to having both sometimes, right? Where you have districts and you have at large. I think that's also an opportunity to look at. And whether that makes sense. When you start consolidating districts, then you're growing the amount of people that are voting in that particular district, and that changes the types of representation that you would have depending on the precinct and the voter makeup. Even though it's a nonpartisan, that does factor into that. So Zach is alluding, so I also lead our Greater Topeka Chamber Political Action Committee, and that is loosely affiliated with the chamber, but a separate entity. So they do endorse city, county, and state candidates, and we did endorse them last year.
And just to kind of, part of the conversation we had with Mayor Padilla was concerns about having both district elected and at-large members at the same time. The fear that at-large members would feel that they are more important or represent more people, and so their voice or their vote should be larger than those that only serve a certain amount of people. I mean, in your perspective, do you see that that would be an issue? Has it been an issue in other communities that you've experienced?
I mean, again, I can argue this, right? So is it a quantity type of scenario, or is it based on the demographics and the makeup that you have in there? Because sometimes in a particular district, so if I have all of the manufacturing companies, for example, right, and you have nothing on the other side, technically you represent a greater percentage in that particular district than you do in any other part of the community. So I think I don't know that is fairly accurate, but I can see why it could come up. Yeah.
That's all I've got for elections. I guess the biggest question is, do you or any of the members of the Greater Topeka Partnership or anyone that you would represent have any, whether, I don't want to be negative about the terminology, but any words about our city manager form versus a strong mayor system and how that would change? No? Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest question. We haven't had anyone come talk to us
Yeah.
yet that didn't like the system we currently
I think
have,
it's-
but we do
it
have
works,
some
right?
public comment that have said otherwise, so always good to, the business community is always a good one to come to, because so far we've heard from a lot of staff.
Right. Right.
Does the chamber have any kind of a policy document or?
We
you
do.
make
We
reference
have
back-
we have a legislative agenda.
Okay, would that relate specifically to the PICA? Are there pieces of it that relate
It
directly to the
does,
city
it
government?
would relate directly to Topeka, not necessarily to city government, but Topeka overall.
Okay.
And so some of the elements of it would touch the
Is that something that's
the government.
available
That is
on the
available to
internet,
the
or-
public, and I can share that out with you all
Yeah,
as
if
well.
you would, I think we'd like to see that.
There is an item that you had shared earlier when we were talking about populations. I have to come back to it, right?
Yes,
We were talking
yes.
about county growth versus city growth. That could be a conversation if that's something that you all want to reference as a part of your report, is the discussion around the 3-mile radius and how easy it is for development outside of the area, but still kind of there's that supposed to be that collaboration between city and county on that greater 3-mile radius. There was also a bill that was introduced at the state level to try and do away with city involvement in that, but keep county, and that should be moving to an interim study, but I think that's an important topic to look into, because there has been some commentary that's been made around potential
I appreciate you
development.
raising that. I think Topeka is the only city in the state that has an arrangement where the city exercises extraterritorial subdivision
Right.
control, but no zoning authority.
Yep.
And it's a curious,
It is.
it's a curious arrangement, and it's got to
right.
be confusing to developers
Yes.
that come
Yeah,
to.
so there's been some of that.
Yeah.
There's also, when we look at, for example, data, right, like you're referencing earlier, if you look at our crime rates, we could look relatively high right now as a city, but that's because a good percentage is also outside of our city that's living in that surrounding community. They're still serviced by the Topeka, they still have Topeka addresses and everything, but they're not affecting the direct percentages and stats. And so it does look as though we're doing a lot worse than what we could be looking like because of those that are kind of filtered out of the area. So that's two pieces, right? There's the piece of the 3-mile development side of it. There's also the stat piece. And then there's also just the conversation of annexation, which has been thrown out before as well. And is that something that makes sense? And I'm not pushing one way or the next, right? But these are all things that I've heard and I'm aware of, and I think that they warrant some additional conversations.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the whole issue of extraterritorial authority is kind of a third rail
Yeah.
of local government. So,
Yeah.
Juliet, before we wrap things up, I want to thank you for coming.
Of course.
I appreciate that, your time. And pass along thanks to the chamber in general for the input. And I would like to ask any members of the chamber to contact the committee directly if they have other additions, comments, or concerns, or anything like that, because they're out there. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
So we have a Legislative Lens newsletter that we push out from the chamber. One of the things that they like to do is find where I've been in the media or in the community and stick that. So they'll probably include this and then the link to about this review committee and ways to connect.
Good to know.
do you see, and I know you're pressed for time here, but you're still sitting down, so I ask questions before you stand up.
Because I'm not rude.
Do you see, does the chamber see greater opportunities for city-county cooperation with respect to economic development? I know you got JADO, but is there be a more powerful, more meaningful
I think JADO is
level of
very
cooperation?
powerful. I think JADO is very powerful. And what I'll do outside of the legislative agenda is also include some recent reports that have been made that might be beneficial in kind of capturing how they've collaboratively worked together. But they do a tremendous amount of work together, and they look into projects and thoroughly ask appropriate questions. So I think that is a unique. Sometimes some communities, the community that I was in before, one of the communities, we had separate entities for the same function, right? And so economic development, you can have it from city, you had it from county, you had it from private sector. You had business group, private, you had it public, you had a county. So it was about 3 for every single thing. Talk about overwhelming for anyone to understand who did what, and everyone started doing their own version of something instead of working together to get something done. So sometimes when something's already working pretty good, you just continue to enhance on that. You don't need to continue to create different things or spin-offs of them. Okay?
Yep.
I'm going to get up before you think of another question.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you for
much.
having me.
Thank you.
Yes.
It's been
Thank you
helpful.
very much for your
Yes,
time.
it's a pleasure. Yes.
Thank you. I'll mail the questions to you. Well, our other conferees are representatives of JUMP. And Sarah is the lead organizer. If I remember the title correctly.
That is correct.
And you want to introduce your...
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, give me just a moment here.
Would it just be the two of you?
Yes.
Okay. Let me move one of those chairs here so you have a little bit more room.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, as he shared, my name is Sarah Balzer. I'm the lead organizer of Topeka Jump. I'm here with Minister Melodine Bird of El Shaddai Ministries. She is one of our co-chairs this year. We were also expecting Pastor Ko, who's on our executive committee, but as pastor, he had some urgent business come up, so he sends his regrets he can't be here. I will cover what Pastor Ko was planning to review, and then turn it over to Melodine and then close us out. I did bring a few documents I will share with you guys. Hopefully be helpful as I'm going along here, if you could pass this around. So we'll start with just a little bit of a background on our organization and what we do, our priorities, and then just a couple observations that we've had as we have connected with the governing body. So Topeka Jump stands for Justice Unity Ministry Project, which is long, and so that's why we call it JUMP. We're a coalition of 33 different faith communities, and our mission is to provide a powerful vehicle for marginalized communities in Shawnee County to do justice. So we differentiate between justice and mercy. A lot of our congregations do some mercy ministry, direct service work. They donate and invest and volunteer with organizations like Let's Help and Doorstep and Habitat for Humanity and the Rescue Mission. The list goes on, and we encourage them to continue in that work. But when we join together in our work as Topeka Jump, we're focused on how the systems that impact our communities can be amended to support the people who are on the margins of our community. And so for this reason, we are very frequently interacting with both the city and county governing bodies. So we'll share a little bit about our priorities and observations. The first priority for us is increasing the amount of affordable housing in Topeka. So back in 2020, the city of Topeka did a citywide housing market study and survey that found a shortage of over 10,000 affordable homes and apartments for low-income Topeka families. So of course that doesn't mean that many people are experiencing homelessness, but what it does mean is that there are folks that are living in housing that's unsafe, or maybe they're doubling up with relatives or friends in apartments that are or homes that are much too small for them and their family. Or they're just straight up having to make really tough decisions, like, am I going to put healthy food on the table, or am I going to pay rent? And so the top recommendation from that 2020 study was to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's a tool that uses both public and private funding to incentivize developers to build more affordable housing. Now, for about 5 years, that Affordable Housing Trust Fund sat inactive and underfunded. And so recently we have been able to successfully press for some follow through on those recommendations. So far the city has invested $750,000 of one-time funds, the city manager added this activation to his strategic priorities. They revised the ordinance so that it could be activated, and then, as you probably heard from Councilman Duncan a couple weeks back, they have pledged to form a committee and activate at their April 1st council meeting. So that is some good progress, but there is, of course, still the issue of finding permanent funding, because there's $1 million in there right now, and that's not going to last too long because we need a lot of affordable housing. And so really across the country, successful affordable housing trust funds are sustained with annual investments of public dollars. Private dollars do flow in as well once you get that initial investment.
Sarah, I might interrupt you just to mention that the city manager was at our previous meeting, our most recent meeting, and he mentioned that the possibility of a dedicated sales tax for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was something that was being discussed. No action, no decisions have been made, but it is something that's on the table to be discussed, which I was encouraged to hear.
Yeah, and we're definitely hoping to continue the conversation with the city manager and other representatives about how to get this thing funded, whatever that looks like. So I think now I will hand it over to Meladine to talk about our two other active priorities.
Okay. Hello, my name is Meladine Bird. I am one of the co-chairs for Topeka Jump. Been a part of Jump since the initiation and just moved through the ranks. Sometimes willingly, other times, yes, I'll take that role on. I do justice because, first of all, that's what God calls for in the Bible. It talks about justice, doing justice. It's my legacy. My father, he would be thrilled for organized justice ministry. When he was living back in the 70s, him and several other community leaders and pastors did the work we're doing now, but it just wasn't as large and as formed. So the mantle fell on me. And also, I consider myself to be the voice for the voiceless. And when I say that, I don't mean people can't, deaf, but I talk about babies, infants, seniors, people who don't know where to go to get help. So I put my voice in with many others to what we call organized people to seek out justice. So I'm a voice crying out for justice for all. Our next priority is violence reduction. 36 Topekans were murdered in 2023, a tragic new record for our city. Our research shows that Topeka needs a proven violence reduction program with trained community members who can step in the moment violence occurs to help de-escalate the situation and prevent retaliation between groups. Retaliation has been a major cause of increasing violence in Topeka. JUMP was instrumental in forming CIVIC, which stands for Community Inspired Violence Intervention Coalition, a group of dedicated to using this strategy to reduce violence in Topeka. This group already received $600,000 to kickstart a proven violence intervention program and plans to have the program up and running by the end of this summer. We are now pressing for our city and county to support the program so it can be sustained in the long term.
Could I ask you, the 600,000, none of that was city money, is that right?
No.
So private source? None of it was city money?
Correct.
Finally, I will share about homelessness. The number of people experiencing homelessness in Topeka has risen by over 60% in just 3 years. Housing programs in Topeka have strict requirements like needing an ID, class participation, staying sober, or leaving pets behind. These can all be barriers that prevent people from seeking shelter. There are many communities across our country that have services that remove those barriers while still keeping residents and staff safe. These are called low barrier shelters, and we need one in Topeka. Alongside our partners at All Hands on Deck, Jump is pushing our community to invest in a low barrier shelter and other compassionate solutions to homelessness. Now, our lead organizer, Sarah, will share some observations about our interaction with the city government.
Yeah, so as you can see laid out here, definitely some benefits as well as some challenges. I would say, especially in comparison to county meetings, which are very frequently in the morning. It's very helpful that city council meetings are held in the evenings when all members of the community, even those who work 9 to 5, can be there, because like if this meeting were during the day, Melodine couldn't be here because she's working. I think it's also very helpful to have some direct representation as listed here, council members elected by district, so they are accountable to people in their district and the issues that those individuals are facing. So the challenges that I've observed, and I think that our leadership has observed over the years, there's been quite a bit of turnover in city staff. Our goal as an organization is to be able to develop some relationships of mutual respect with elected officials and appointed officials alike. But it's very difficult to build a relationship when you've got I'm pretty sure we've gone through like 5 different city managers in 10 years. And so some of that turnover I know is not avoidable, but some more consistency could be beneficial. And I don't know whether that's, different contractual language or different incentive. I don't know what that is, but that's definitely been a challenge. Another challenge is public comment and the way that shows up at city council meetings. We've had members that, we have some older members who don't drive at night. And so when they have to wait all the way till, 8 or 8:30 or 9 p.m., however long it takes in a longer city council meeting, it's pretty difficult. We also have young parents who got to get home and get their kiddos to bed. And I know that the city does, value the input of citizens. And so one thing that could be beneficial is having all public comment at the beginning of meetings. I know I would encourage our folks to stay over the duration of the meeting and not just give their public comment and leave, but for those who absolutely have to, that could be helpful. And then you'll see this kind of throughout the priority issues we're working at. It would be really helpful if there were some mechanism, I don't know what this would look like, for follow through on study recommendations. So I think that we've really noticed a trend in our work. The council is approving funding for an outside consultant to come in, do some studies on our community that are providing recommendations on how to address our problems, but there's no system for making sure those recommendations are followed through on. And so there are many, many examples of, some of these have been dramatically delayed. Some of them have not been implemented at all, and it's difficult to tell if and when the city plans to revisit those. So those are, that's kind of the presentation we have planned for you this evening. I'm happy to take questions you might have. Some of it we'll be able to speak to, and some of it Melodine and I will only be able to speak for ourselves because we have not run this. Some of the stuff we're not able to run by everybody. So,
I have some questions right off the bat. Thank you for coming and being frank. This is hard and hard to ask. We're making of you all to say some things, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Under the challenges, when you talk about turnover, and you mentioned, is it the manager itself, the city manager position, or are there other positions that, does it make sense? Is it the manager that is the key position as far as employment?
We've had quite a turnover of city managers.
Oh, yes.
Been other city official, other city held jobs, like the police chief and all those. So it's across the board,
Okay.
that we get that. And so you would get we've had some city managers, if we had a relationship with, we built a relationship, had things established, things that was to go forth, and then whether it was to relocation for whatever reason, or they decided to, not to run the next time, the next person might just reverse everything, or things that were set up, they don't follow through with it. And so it's kind of like starting over again.
I got you. So, but we're talking like elections aside,
Elections.
the manager,
Yeah.
the police, fire chiefs, department heads.
Yes,
Okay. And that's,
that's been part of the issue.
all right. And then, so do you believe that the turnover and the last point, your lack of, are they connected? Is there a connection between the turnover and the lack of follow through? Because once leaves and somebody, then there's a different agenda, a different to-do list, a different wish list. I mean, those two seem to be, when I first glanced at that, I'm like, oh, there's a connection there.
Yeah, I don't know if I mean, there's a lot of different factors, so I think it would be difficult to say for sure. But I think I can share, an anecdote on our affordable housing campaign. And this is even before I was on staff at Topeka Jump, but we felt like we had built a really good relationship with Brent Trout, who was a city manager at the time, and felt that we were making some good momentum and good progress on affordable housing in Topeka. And that momentum did not continue past him until more recently. And so, I mean, it could be.
Okay.
And also with the city manager, they could, like I said, with Brent Trout, things established and set up, but then it would be a roadblock thrown up with city council, with some city council members. So, it's kind of like, okay, and some of them are very, or no, we're going to stand firm on this. And they go back and forth, sometimes among themselves. So I think sometimes some of the long-term city council members are those who don't get out into all the areas of the people they represent, then we lose out there. Because I know in the council, I've been up under 2 city council districts as far as my living spaces, where the one, there's always out there, in the community, you sit out there at different events, that you would see them coming through your neighborhood, not just when it was election time or they want to push something. And then with the other, the only time I ever seen that person or even had any interaction or anything was when they first ran, and of course they out there because they want to get elected. Then after that, so it amazes me when they say, oh, well, the people in my district, so my thing is, what people in your district are you talking to? Because you're not talking to all of them, or even across the board. You might talk to people just over in this area of your district, but what about these people here? So I would like to see more wide representation with them really talking to the people and getting input and observations, and not just them having that handful.
Yeah, and I think what Melodine is speaking to there is the elected representatives, and I don't know how you adjust your form of government to account for that, but in terms of city staff, I think that a little bit more power there. I would say the current city manager, even when we don't necessarily agree on everything, so far he has been very open to conversation and, oh, hey, I want to hear what you guys have to say. And yeah, even if we don't agree on everything, I'll at least hear you out. And I think that's helpful.
Thank you. I just retired as a U.S. government teacher from one of the 501 high schools. I'm going to say 2 words. Elections matter.
Yeah.
I think while we're talking about elections, this seems to be one of my favorites to talk about.
That's all right.
Number one, I want to just congratulate and thank both of you for putting this together. This is fantastic. This not only gives me information about your organization, but about how it relates to what we're doing here today. That's fantastic. But kind of what Connie was getting at is, that's kind of our job here, is to figure out, is this city system working for citizens and for organizations that are trying to make positive change? I think some of the city manager issues were ones that the city couldn't control, and it was unfortunate. I'm glad to know that we've got a good city manager, and all my conversations with people in and out of staff have been supportive of the city manager. But I kind of want to get into governing body, the mayor and the city council members. You talked about district representation being beneficial to some of these communities. But then we talked about turnover creates change, which is, always going to be true. I've heard some comments about term limits because we get people that, again, they'll go and they'll get elected and work hard to get elected. And then their concern is, I don't see them that much anymore. And we all know the power of an incumbency, right? Do we talk about term limits? Or, they're serving 4-year terms. Is that the right amount of time? So I would just love to get your perspective on, do we feel like the current system of 4-year terms, and to my knowledge, no term limits, is beneficial to the community, or would it ever be beneficial to create some of those term limits, to create some of that turnover for change? I'd love to get your perspective on it, because I think that you've talked more about it than anyone we've talked to so far.
Well, this is going to be one where Melodine and I are just going to have to speak for ourselves and not on behalf of Topeka Jump,
That's
because
okay.
we have not talked about that with our leadership and members. But again, that's kind of one of those things where I could see it personally, both ways. You want that consistency, and so you don't have a bunch of turnover and initiatives that get dropped, and at the same time, it's always good to have new ideas. So personally, I don't know if I can give you a good answer on that. I don't know, Melodine.
I think that term limits are good, but it's just a matter of determining what the length of terms would be, and because with the president, you could 2 times, and then after the second time,
Yep.
you in office, you can't. So it'd be a matter of if you would just go strictly term limit, how long would each term be, and how many times can you run and win and be in that position? And because consistency is good, but I also think on the other end, it's kind of like, do we, do this, or do we just let them have freestyle and they just be there as long as they want it? But I think that for anybody that's running, if you got somebody that decides to go up against the people whose seats are up now, and if those people are deciding, they want to go again, and so I think that if whoever gets in there, that they're well versed with that they can follow the city government, and that they just don't say, I want to be a city council member, or I want to be mayor, but that you are well versed and with your community and know what's going on, and that you've seen what worked, you've seen what didn't work, and come in with ideals and willing to work to implement, if there needs to be change. Maybe you have an ideal that could, hey, this has been not too good. I have some ideas of stuff that I think that would work, and that you'll be willing to do that, but don't just want it for the title, know.
Yeah.
But want it because you want to make a difference, and that you care about the whole city, and that you care about everyone, and that it's just not certain things, but you're there for the right reason.
We can always hope that's what we get out of our candidates, but we're kind of here to make sure that the system allows for some of that retention, but also making sure that things are fair for the rest of the community as well. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate your comments and the hard work that you guys do. I won't take up a bunch of time. I'll give it back.
And one of the things a couple of people had talked about before coming in is making a combination of districts as well as at large. And what I've heard from you is actually one of the first arguments against that, by saying that if you don't feel that a district council person is out in their district, who lives in their district, how would an at-large person that is not in that district, how would they give you any better coverage, any better?
Yeah, and-
That is actually one of the first arguments that I've heard against it, and thank you very much.
And I don't know. I mean, before this I was in Lawrence, and so that's my other, thing I use for reference. And I don't think I've seen any where you've had both, districts and at large. So I don't know what that would look like and how that would impact our campaigns. But, I think for the purpose of, I think any of our leaders that were sitting here are just like, man, whatever form we can deal with, if it helps us get these things done. Some of this we've been working on for, it's been almost a decade on the trust fund, because this is something we were working on even before the housing city. I always get confused on the title. The housing study from 2020. So whatever it takes to get this accomplished, I think our folks will be happy.
So thank y'all.
Thank you.
So in terms of the way our city is governed, I'm looking at the crime, the CMC, the civic. So I think I recall there was something a couple of years ago I'm bringing this up because I was a part of that, because I'm going somewhere with this. So in terms of, because city can't do everything, government can't do anything, but they are truly supposed to support the city, those that will. And so in terms of that, I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing you say you are doing the legwork, you're presenting it to the city, but you're not having the support from the city. Like, you'll do the legwork, you come up with the program, you do this, but you don't see that support of your efforts to take care of homelessness or, the crime and all that. Is that what I'm understanding? That there's barriers because of lack of consistency in staff, high turnover, so you're not getting the agendas created. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, and I think it looks different for different issues. I think that, Melodine can probably speak to, this is really our second go around on our violence reduction campaign. We felt like we had an agreement and a good system set up, and that did not come to fruition. My experience being the second go around with Civic, we've had good conversations with council members and the new police chief so far, but they're very new conversations. So I think when it comes to that, the biggest issue has been affordable housing.
Which is, yeah.
Which is hugely important.
Everywhere, yeah.
So.
It is, yeah. Well, got it. Yes, it does.
And I know you guys probably get tired of hearing about housing, maybe at least from me. But, just to tie a couple points together, and I really, on the challenges you have on the second page of your handout, the mechanism for follow-up on studies. This is the housing study, okay, that we've been talking about in 2020.
I need to get one of those.
It is an extremely well, I think you had a representative on the steering committee, I think, right? Shufflepine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steve. Yeah.
Stephen
Shufflepine.
Yeah, I don't know him, but he's on the steering committee. But it's a really good study. I don't know what the price tag on it was, but I imagine it was money well spent. And it did identify a crisis, and it did set out an implementation strategy. I would venture to guess that maybe 2 of the current city council members were around when this was put together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe two.
Yeah.
So the problem, and it's the nature of the beast. You can't control the elected officials' turnover. It happens, right?
Yes.
But Topeka has had problems on the top executive level, the city manager, but hopefully that's stabilized now. And you never know, but hopefully Dr. Perez will be around for a long time. But the issue is, in terms of ownership of this study, I have found in my experience, that you just got to pound on it, and I think the city is paying more attention to it now, but it is getting 5, 6 years old data. It's important to keep at it. And you mentioned the Affordable Housing Trust Fund finally got some cash in it, not enough, but it is gaining some traction, but it's taken a long time. And there are other studies that have been done, and Topeka's not unique in this category, but there are other studies that are done that do end up on the shelf. And it's unfortunate. But I think there are ways to ensure that at least there's ongoing discussion to keep studies and the recommendations alive over time, notwithstanding turnover in staff and turnover in elected officials. So I appreciate that challenge that you have here.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk?
And with the studies, I think they're important, and our people do work hard, to do the studies and to get accurate information and branch out there, to get facts and figures. What's amazing is that we can give them something, we can go, we can sit down with them, we can talk with them, and they'll decide we're going to bring in a consultant. They want to spend money, the money they said they don't have to do anything. We can't do it because we have no money, but then you have money for what you want to have it for. But you spend money for a consultant, and the consultant can tell you the exact same thing, and you still are sitting there. So it's like...
Yeah. And I don't even think that that's just a critique that Topeka Jump has. I remember sitting in the council meeting, when they brought in Silver Consulting to talk about homelessness and the recommendations there. I think one of the first comments was from Councilman Brett Kell, who was like, well, I appreciate all your hard work, but this feels like stuff that we already knew. And so, okay, if we did already know this and a consultant is telling us that's what we need to do, what is it going to take to actually implement these recommendations? And so I don't fully know what the answer to that is, but I hope we can figure it out. Because, talk about it is getting going on affordable housing. We're excited about that. But what has happened in those 5 years? Probably the data that they were able to access for that was early 2020, late 2019 at the most. And think about how much the cost of living has increased since then. Think about how difficult the pandemic was for, lower income or working families especially. Our housing needs, there's no way to put a figure on this, but I would assume that the need is actually greater than what's been outlined in the housing study. So, how could that look different had we acted sooner?
Yeah, and if you look at the number of dwelling units that have been permitted and constructed since then, we are falling farther behind. We're not making up ground, we're losing ground. Housing.
Housing.
Other questions for Jump? Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's helpful.
Thank you all.
I appreciate you taking the time and making the effort. It's good.
Absolutely. And before
Appreciate your organization.
Yes, before we leave, I will extend the invitation to you all. We have upcoming our biggest event of the year is our annual Nehemiah Action. Sorry?
Is that the expo?
It is at White Concert Hall, Washburn's White Concert Hall, and that's the event each year where we lift up these problems and our proposals to both elected and appointed officials and ask them to, follow through on some commitments to address these issues. So open to the public. Would love to see you all there. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Let's go back to item number 3 on the agenda, which is to once again try to fill in some dates and conferees or commitments for public hearings on upcoming meetings. And just a quick refresher, for the April 9 meeting, we have a representative from the League of Women Voters, and we also have Councilmember Marcus Miller. Is that going to fill the agenda?
I mean, usually 2 speakers will take up an hour, so I think 2 speakers is,
All
yeah.
right.
You all agreed on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We can start working on
Yes, we need to.
we can start working on our to-do list as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, right after this,
Yeah.
yeah.
We need to.
April 23, I think at one time, I was visiting with Vice Chair, I thought at one time we had decided that the April 23 was going to be a public hearing, set aside for a public hearing. Is that correct? Is that you guys' desire? Or do we need to have some Plan B in the event we have a sparse crowd?
We're looking into whether it needs to have an actual public hearing. Seems how we have time available at every meeting for the public hearing. So we think
Yeah.
that's correct.
Yep. I'm going to double check, and I will get back with you before our next meeting of whether or not we actually have to have a public hearing, or if, since we're doing your public comments at every meeting, whether that's sufficient and meets the criteria.
So what's the committee's pleasure? What do you want to do on April 23?
May I suggest that if we do not have to have a standalone public hearing, let's get started.
Amen.
Let's get started on
Call it a
July.
Hallelujah.
working meeting, something like that.
Yeah,
I agree.
I would note that the report with your recommendations does need to be submitted to the governing body before the end of June.
Right.
We've got to get going.
I think that,
We've got to get going.
Yeah,
So
so
then
the
consider-
23rd, if we don't have to have the public hearing, I think should be a working session.
Yes.
Yes.
To start putting things on paper.
Yes.
After the presenters.
that also gives us time to, if we come up with some ideas and we say, we have an idea on this, it'd be great to hear from this person that may be more of an expert. We've got May to bring them in. I like that.
Yes.
We've had a couple other suggestions for conferees on, I guess this would fit into May or possibly June meetings. Champagne, you talked about the, I think LULAC and the senior citizens.
We got there. We have their, they did email, I met with one and one sent an email. They didn't come, but we have it.
Okay.
Sorry, I can do that. I apologize. So she actually provided some public comment for LULAC, which we're going to add to the record. So that will be attached to the minutes once we get those approved. But I can absolutely send these out to you guys if you would like via email as well. So that way you can look them over. Does that work? Okay, perfect.
And Brian, you said you were going to contact Washburn University, and I know it's kind of a long shot to see if, but
Still working on it.
it's good diplomacy, if nothing else, to reach out to Washburn. And Brian, you'd also mentioned the desire to get police chief, fire chief, department heads, some or all. And I think, I don't know if Brenda was going to look into that, check to see the
Yeah,
availability.
I'll check with her and see where she's at on that, and I'll also go back on emails. She usually copies me on those, but I'll check in and see where we're at on any
Well,
responses.
let me interrupt you, Megan. When you raised that, Brian, I told you I don't remember much discussion among the committee about feelings about having those folks in. Is there any thoughts about, for example, the fire chief?
Yeah, and mine really weren't directly the chiefs. I was mainly looking at the department heads. They were just two that came off the top of my head. So it is really just to get more of the involvement that work with the elected government officials. And so it could be any of the chiefs, or it could be the department heads, somebody that is in the upper workings that works with the elected officials. And that can be in person, that can be a writing statement, anything like that.
I think that if my memory is correct, that Brenda had sent out an email saying that she would just kind of put out an all
Yes.
staff,
She did.
so.
I think that's exactly what she did.
Yeah.
She sent out,
Okay.
and I haven't seen any responses come back, but
Right.
maybe send another one.
Can we ask for a deadline on those comments? Because
End of the month, or do you want to do like halfway through May?
through the end of
Like that?
April?
Yeah,
That's the
that
entire
gives them
month of
another
April.
month to
Yes.
put
And
together
then,
comment.
you know, no response is our answer as
Right.
well. And that's,
Gives us enough time before our working meeting at the end of April to,
yeah.
because I don't think we need to compel every department head and all the
Well, if-
chiefs
yeah.
to come in and talk to us. I think that,
1,000%.
to be honest, might be a waste of their time, and I think we might get a lot of the same things from everybody, so.
You are correct.
And I just want to check and make sure, would we like the deadline to be before the first May hearing, or May meeting, or for the public comment?
We wanted, for the public
Or for
comment.
for the input from
The staff.
from the staff, yes.
You want to do by the April 20 whatever meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so we want it
That's
before that
4
meeting?
weeks, right? 4
Yes.
weeks
Yeah,
from now?
that should be.
That's,
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us up to when?
Well, we've got April full, and then we've decided that by the end of April, we'll either have more public comment or none, with ample opportunity for public comment, especially after Connie's been on the news and things like that. If we don't get public comment by the end of April, I don't think anything's going to compel more people in the month of May.
right, and we
Yeah.
need to get it
Um, I would
Silence
say,
is an answer.
Yes,
Right.
it is.
I just want to recommend, I also don't want to avoid us that just because we don't have people on the calendar to come talk to us in May doesn't mean that we can't be productive in May. Once we start working at the end of April, it might take us a month to put together a big report that we all want to agree on, because we
That's-
present it at the end of June, but it has to be done well before that to refine it internally.
Yes.
So I think we've done a great job to get the people that we need in here, and I think we've got a good goal by the end of April to have our conferees kind of done with.
Yes.
Well, should we segue over to the discussion about the topics? And
Do you want dates?
I think we've got,
Yeah, yes, I was going to suggest, we need,
for May, we have,
Dates for
it's
May.
May 7 and May 21, is that correct?
I don't think we ever set May,
I
we
don't
just
think
went
we
through
ever
April.
set any dates.
We never set May, we only went through April
Yes,
to
that's
decide
correct.
how we were doing. So we
Okay, well,
haven't set
May 7
anything
is the
official.
first, I think the first Wednesday.
So that'll be an 11, 1 maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we just want to echo what we have done on the
I-
7th and on the
yeah. And on the
21st?
21st and evening.
Works for me.
And then we'll do 7th is 11 to 1, and the 21st being 6 to 8?
6
Yep.
to 8, yeah.
We got crosstalk here. What's the date in May that we want to?
I think it's exactly what you've got on your calendar, May
Yes,
7th and May 21st.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, May 7th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., May 21st, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Bingo.
There it is.
You want to,
And then do we
well,
want
we
to
go ahead and schedule the June
June?
meetings as well, just and leave them blank as to what we're going to do. Is that okay, Megan?
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds
And
like
on
a
my
plan.
calendar, that's June 4th and June 18th. Is
Yeah,
that?
that's what I've got here.
So,
now, I do want to bring up, if we wanted to actually present it to like a city council meeting, the city council only meets the first 3 Tuesdays in June. So I believe, and Megan, correct me if I'm
Yes,
wrong,
yeah.
it'd be June 3rd, June 10th, and June 17th.
Gotcha.
So, so if
Right.
you wanted to present it by, say, June 17th, you would
right.
probably need to have it.
So not to, I think in June, right, we're going to be doing pretty much entirely just putting together a report.
Yeah.
June 4th, that works. Obviously, it's our regular time, 11 to 1. If we want, we could do, I don't know if it works for everybody else, but we could do the following Wednesday on the 11th, assuming that it works for staff too. We can decide what time we want to meet. But
And the place, you know.
Right.
Right.
If the room's available.
so do we think what is it, the 11th? or-
So our goal
Yes.
is presenting on the third
We would present
Tuesday
on Tuesday,
in
June
June.
17th.
That's our deadline, correct?
Yeah,
That's
that
it?
is the last
That's
city
it.
council meeting in June.
Last of
Okay.
the Mohicans. Like,
Okay.
gotta get her done.
So, is anybody opposed to June 11th? because it's not a usual date, it's technically the second Wednesday, so.
No, we gotta get her done.
Okay,
That works.
well then let's put that into the
It
world and
works.
check with staff to make sure
Yeah,
everybody.
make sure that we're all,
At what time did you want to do on June 11th? Did
That's
that
a good
11 to
question.
1, or did you want to try to do another 6 to 8?
To me, it's whatever city staff has available.
Yeah, and that's something too, we can always check on that to see for the 11th specifically, if we're more available during the day that day, if we're good in the evening. So what we can do is we just want to go ahead and set that for the 11th, and then I can always check with Jane from the mayor's office of what's available, if that works.
Okay.
Do we want to aim for 11 to 1 just to give
Yeah.
staff an idea? That way, staff doesn't have to be here from 6 to 8 on a day after the city council has already met too, so.
Right.
All right.
And I'll double check on that for you guys too.
Thank you, Megan.
At the last meeting, I asked you all to put together a list of issues that you had heard today, what resonated with you. And here's the idea. I visited a little bit with the vice chair about this. It is not to relieve me of work, but that's the way it's going to sound. I would like to go through the issues, to have a cumulative listing of the issues, if we have a consensus as to what the issues are, and then specifically a consensus as to whether or not a given issue relates to the mission of the committee. I mean, we have had issues raised that are interesting, but probably lie outside the scope of the work we're doing. So we narrow down the issues. And then, my friends, the rest of the story is, I would like to assign to the members, volunteers hopefully, to do a preliminary write-up of those issues, of each issue. I'm not dumping everything on one person, but just to pick and choose the issue and write it up, whether it's a 2-sentence or 2 pages, whatever it is, as to what we've heard and why we think it is something that's worthy of further discussion that keeps that issue alive. And it's kind of a preliminary draft, if you will, of the report. And if you feel inclined to actually include a recommendation, a preliminary recommendation, that's fine too. But it's just a write-up, so we have a start on what the report is. We do that, now. I would go through this list and make, you make your choices as to what you want to write up, and then maybe by the first meeting in May, have that, we can distribute it, have comment, see if there's an agreement to keep those issues alive, with an eye towards the final report. And there'll be editing as we go along so that the final document looks like it was in one voice, okay? I don't know, you're all highly educated, highly trained people, and I'm sure you're all excellent writers, but everybody has a different style. And I think we need to have some uniformity, and we'll figure that out later on. So you okay with that?
Actually, I think we need to have it done by April 23rd meeting for the working session to make that the project for that evening, or to work on that. So-
That'd be great. That'd be great.
But I do think this is a great idea, divide the work, and that way not, so I think that's a great idea, divide the work. Yeah.
Well, I imagine, what I did was I put together a list that's just based in chronological order, so there's no priority. I don't know, how did you guys do it?
I just kind of spewed issues that I don't think we need to address, and issues I would like to see or maybe pursue. And that was it. Just
Well,
kinda-
if we had a whiteboard or a blackboard,
We've
Which
got
would be even
pens
better.
and agendas to write on, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Got the pen.
Okay.
well,
Would you like to start?
let me go through my list. I've got a list of about 20, okay? So I hope that's more than anybody else has. But include some issues tonight that we heard from Jump and the Chamber. We had Professor Zacharias talked about a satisfaction survey, an annual satisfaction survey. Question, is that within the scope of the committee's assignment?
I don't think so.
Nope.
I don't think it has anything to do with the charter, other than if we want to put in the charter that there is an annual survey that goes out. Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you have any, before something just drops completely off the table, do you have any interest in having a report that says these are the issues we looked at that do relate to the mission? These are other issues that were raised by conferees that are worthy of note? And the survey is a good example of that. I think it's a good government step. It's something that the city should look to do.
Yeah, but Jim, I thought the point of us right now is to see what we're going to throw out as ideas as a whole. I thought that's what this was for. The
Recommendations, yeah.
recommendations are what we were going to, and then you threw that out, and then we said, it was like, yeah, no, we don't think that. So I'm trying to figure out.
We need to get through your list.
Right, I'm trying to.
Yeah, but we need to get through your list. So, let's hear your list and we'll take it from there, okay?
Okay.
Check everyone's mics when you're speaking.
Well, all right, Zach, I attribute this to you early on, is to talk about the pay levels, which is in the charter. Pay levels for the mayor and council members. Is that something we want to keep alive? The response we got from council members, I think, was that everything's okay, everything's cool.
Right,
But
yeah. I mean, everything's on the table, right? I think that we could get down into the weeds at our April, like our working meeting, but it's something that's technically in our purview, so we can have a discussion about it, but I think that we've also had a lot of time to think
you
about
want the
that
question,
topic.
do you want to keep, there's a consensus that it relates to the charter, because it's in the charter, so that's, we passed that test, but it is something that we want to keep alive or drop it off the table.
I say drop it off the table. I'm not sure that pay has anything to do with
Yeah, I don't think we-
recommendations that we want to make on the form of government or how they're processing or how they're doing their job.
Okay.
Because
What's next?
going back to the purview of the committee's task is to study and review the form of government and make recommendations to the governing body for amendments and modifications. So I think anything that doesn't meet that sentence
Is
doesn't get
Yeah.
done.
it's not.
Okay. Something that was looked at in the 2014, so I believe it is within our scope, and it was raised by both Spencer Duncan and by Dr. Perez, and that is city-county cooperation. And you heard it tonight as well, I think, in a way from Juliet and also the junk folks. It'd be a recommendation, or the issue would be whether the city and the county are cooperating as fully as possible, to put it in our non-artful terms, interlocal cooperation, to put some emphasis upon that.
Yes.
It is something
Pursue
that.
it. I believe that's a good,
Yeah.
Okay.
recommendation that we should
Yes.
I do
look
too.
into that.
To be clear, cooperation
Yeah,
and not
not
merging.
Not
Right.
consolidation.
That's
No,
not.
not consolidation, but
It ain't gonna happen.
cooperation
Yes,
or collaborating
collaboration.
on more issues.
Is there somebody that wants to take that issue and do a write-up on it? All right, I will, but I'm not going to say that very often, okay? Councilman Duncan, in his presentation, made the comment that he thought that the council should pay greater attention to the recommendations of different citizen advisory bodies. I think that was maybe like CDC, and so on. But then Monique said that she thought that the recommendations of the organizations that she worked with, including like the ADA and the CDC, that their recommendations were heard and well considered by the council. So I don't know who's right on that. You got a councilman saying that recommendations aren't given the attention they should, and then you got a staff person that's directly involved in it says they are, so.
Jim, I've got that on my list. His comment was considering input from all the boards and commissions that the city has, and their input is, again, just gone, take it, just nod and push it aside. But that was on my list as well. Oh, really? Okay.
And jumps too. If you
Really?
let that jump
Okay,
just
so
in.
some kind of, what's the magic word? Recommendation, procedure, policy.
I will say
What's the
that-
magic word?
I'll get closer to the mic, that the city already has policy like April 1st, I'm representing the HRC and making a presentation to the governing body because it's required that all these commissions give an annual report to the governing body. We've passed stuff that got passed by the Policy and Finance Committee. So like, I can attest to the fact that I feel like for some things, the governing body's listening. As far as recommendations, I don't even know what we would provide to force them to listen more.
Do we need a response?
So I would say we could probably put something in the report that says, we heard
Follow-up,
concern, we
maybe?
heard concern about this. We recommend that you
Respond.
as a-
More
right.
stringent follow-up, because or
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I
let me
just-
see, we've got two tracks going here. One is, you have citizen advisory bodies like the CDC, the community, the council, geez,
I think it's
can't
the
even remember it.
CAC, but
CDC, okay, we're familiar with CDC.
CAC.
And the comment being made that recommendations that they're making aren't given as much consideration as they should. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that's one set of issues. The related issues is, again, this thing here, where it's a study and a report that was actually done by the city paid for it, the city council adopted it, took action to adopt this, and then it, in my words, not anybody else, it's just kind of laid on the table in large part. So you've got things that are from the advisory councils, committees, and you've got internal reports. Do you want to merge those two things together or keep them separate?
I think they're one and the same
Yes, it
for,
is.
this conversation. And thankfully, our speakers from Jump basically gave us the write-up and how we should write it, a mechanism for follow-through on study recommendations.
Yeah.
I mean, they pretty much wrote it up for us. So I think we definitely leave that on our recommendations, and I'll take that one to write up to get it started.
And I'm sorry, Brett, you said you do that?
Yes,
Okay.
I'll take it.
And we might talk a little bit more, because there are, other cities do have a way, a formal way of reviewing and renewing
Yep.
studies or reports that are
Figure
done,
a
including
quick-
cities
quick
in
Google-
Kansas.
A quick Google search, you'll probably find that one.
Yep. Okay, what's
Okay,
next?
I'd say we're almost there, but that's number 4 out of 20. Okay, so Brian has this. Thank you, Brian. Open meetings, and we have the city attorney's memo on the issue of the mayor's ability to communicate with council members. Is that an issue? And I will say, as a retired attorney, I think the memo is dispositive of the issue. I don't know that there really is an issue out there. But
I don't
that's
think
just
there
my,
is either.
that's my
I mean,
thought.
that got into the conversation of should the mayor be allowed to vote in governing body meetings, and that changes how open meetings is. But we didn't hear from anybody else saying that that was an issue.
No.
Yes, Councilmember
There's
Heller
already
was pretty vocal. I mean, she had strong opinions about that. I respect her. She's a good council member. But it just didn't seem like something that rises to our level.
No.
Nope. Next.
Rises to our level. Do you hear me say that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, that's off the table. This whole issue of the number, it is a combined issue, the number of council districts and at-large versus district representation. Do we want to visit that?
No.
And Zach, you've been
I-
vocal about that, as
I've
everybody.
asked the question a lot, but I think I've gotten the answer that I need, which is I didn't see anybody that really said, I want at-large representation. I don't think anybody said anything. We do have public comment about people having opinions about how many council districts there are. So I'm more than happy to put together kind of a paragraph blurb about our feelings towards council districts and at-large, but my recommendation in that is going to be little to no change.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Looking at the last report, there are no at-large districts. Wichita, Overland Park, Wyandotte, Unigov, Olathe, Lawrence, and Manhattan. I don't think there's any at-large members. Wichita has the only one that's term limited to 2 terms, and it looks like they've got a 2-year rotation on all the compared cities 10 years ago. And the size, it ranges from, the largest is Overland Park, and the smallest it looks like is Lawrence and Manhattan.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's political will to add in at large, change the districts. I don't think there's political will for term limits at all.
Because a solution in search of a problem.
I don't think so. Anyway.
I can put together stuff about, and I don't know if anything else is on your list about elections, but I think that's been the thing that I've talked to the most people about is the election process for governing body members. But I've never had anyone talk about at-large as a...
Well, I didn't make, but the related topic, and you've brought it up again, Zach, is the timing of the election, moving it from to coincide with state or federal elections. I have very strong opinions about that for what that's worth, but is that...
That's moot, though. The state legislature passed the law, and all elections are primary August and
Right.
general November.
Right, so why
Yeah,
was
we're
that?
not moving that. I think we were talking mostly about how the election terms are staggered out and rather than it being every other year for, 4 or 5 of them and so on and so forth. But I'm more than happy to write up a informational report about that for our April meeting.
Okay.
Term limits and all, like the whole shebang. So.
Okay. You got the
Dr.
vote.
I got
The vote.
Dr. Perez mentioned hiring a CFO, Chief Financial Officer, you recall that? Is that something that, it is arguably within the charter, the scope of the charter. I'm not so sure that he couldn't just do that, with council approval, that he designates somebody, hires somebody as a CFO. I don't know that it would require any amendment to the existing charter ordinance to add that position. Do you?
Double check.
Yeah.
I could double check for you. I don't believe it does
But
require a change, but I can double check.
is that something that we want to engage in? I get a no? No?
No.
Okay.
All right, next.
Dr. Perez, we come back to housing, right? Okay. And Dr. Perez did mention this, that talked about a dedicated source of funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and you're going to say it's outside the scope of the charter ordinance. Is that correct?
I would say so.
Yeah.
It is a hell of a good idea, okay?
It is, but it is, I'll say, it's, yeah.
We're going to sneak housing in here some way or other, okay? Okay, and again, Mr. Ledbetter raised the issue of council structure and size and at-large versus district, so that's part of what Zach is doing, okay? Mr. Ledbetter, the next couple ones are from him, and these are communications that we received during several points during the month of March, requiring a governing body approval of all contracts in excess of $50,000. And that would be within the scope of the charter ordinance, within our scope. I have not heard a rationale for that. I think, if I remember right, in one of his communications, he indicated that was something that, he says, most cities of the first class operate that way. I have not, that's not, I'm not doubting what he has to say. I don't know what research he did on it, but I'm not sure I've seen that kind of a that kind of a mandate or limitation upon a city manager's authority.
If I might, I wanted to ask whether it's the city clerk's office or the attorney's office, is there currently any limitation on what is that financial threshold that it has to go through, either consent agenda or anything like that?
There is, for all professional contracts, such as like if you need to hire outside counsel or engineering services, there is a $50,000 limit. Anything over $50,000 does have to go to the city council. Typically other contracts, commodities, things like that, there's a bids process. So for all those kind of contracts, there's a bunch of regulations that are set by ordinance of how those contracts are set, what criteria needs to go into picking the contractor. If you want a more detailed synopsis of how how contracts are established or set, you might want to talk to either an inviter or have her provide maybe a memo or something, the Director of Contracts and Procurements, and she can go into a lot more detail as to the process of how contracts are established within Topeka.
Yeah. So the only things that are voted by governing body are just outside contracts, things like that. So if, like, Public Works needed to buy a piece of equipment for $60,000, that's just an internal thing that just goes through the procurement process like usual.
Yeah, like bidding. Yeah. And of course, then there's, the city council establishes the budget every year and.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they operate within the budget.
Yeah,
Right.
operate
They
within the
submit,
budget.
or they ask for requests for proposals. Okay,
Having worked with the Office of Procurement before and understanding the process, I think that it would just administratively would bog down an already long city council meeting to have to approve all those purchases. I understand where Mr. Ledbetter's coming from. Everyone wants transparency, but you're right. The governing body passes a budget. The city manager is responsible for executing it, and we have a pretty decent process internally of making sure that nobody's out there spending a random $50,000 that isn't accounted for. So I am okay just not, whether we need to provide a thing that says we looked at it and decided not to pursue it, or just drop it altogether. But
Drop it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Zach, I also looked at that. And if we even remotely chose to do that, I think the 50,000 is too low. It needs to be
It's easy to hit $50,000.
bingo. Yeah, that's micromanaging. And it's a legit concern. Anyway, but we're done. Next.
Change of form of government. Again, Mr. Ledbetter, going from mayor council to, I guess, the strong mayor council form of government.
No.
Not to say that he hasn't talked to people and things like that. We've
not heard
been,
anything.
as I said, outside of this
One comment.
one
Yeah.
comment for that might represent 100 people, I don't know, but I would invite anybody that listens to give us more comment.
Yeah,
But,
more
up
feedback
to
on
this
it.
date, all the research and all the people we've heard from like this form of government, so I'm in no position to advocate for any change there.
Nothing we've
I don't
heard
know
in
if
any of
Mr.
the
Ledbetter
presentations has
intends
said that we need to do that.
The
So-
size and structure of this city is too large and too complex to go back to drop the manager
Yeah.
position. We need a city
There
manager.
is an
period.
administrative load that we're just not prepared to hand off like that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, the city did
So,
operate
it's a
with
legit
about the same
concern.
population without a manager, and it did not work well.
So what now? I'm sorry.
So this community
Oh, yeah,
did
that
have
was
the
the previous
same
form.
population back
that
in
the
the
voters
70s
said-
and 80s without a manager, and
Yeah.
it didn't work well.
So, yeah.
So,
All right.
I, again, for what it's worth, I think you all have strong opinions about this too. I have a very strong opinion about it, so long with that one.
Okay, next.
An interesting one the last one that he raised, on my list anyway, is talking about monthly work sessions by the governing body to review financial statements prepared by a CPA. I'm not sure, I mean, I understand the concept. I'm not quite sure what problem it's seeking to address. And I don't know that we'd know that without him coming before us and explaining why this is a good idea.
I imagine that, again, it's all about transparency.
I'm sorry, Zachary.
I imagine that it's about transparency. I think that Mr. Ledbetter may be insinuating that having a public work session about the budget allows it to just be a more transparent process, which I'm not against, but again, the city goes through a transparent budgeting process every year that they're in the middle of now, right? So I know that the county, at the county level, which has no administrator and, does it themselves, they have working meetings, but they do it because they have no county manager, and so 3 elected citizens are the managers of the county. We don't have that problem because we
And
have an
isn't our city
administrator.
transparent enough that if anybody wanted these documents, they could request them through an open records request?
stuff is posted online already.
Yeah,
It's,
Okay.
It's available at their fingertips if they just go out there and seek it.
yep. And there's always open for public comment on budgeting processes and stuff
Sure.
like that. So again, while I understand the need for transparency, I don't know if I think this is, again, just administrative burden. that-
Did you read his proposal? We talked about a CPA. Is he talking about somebody outside the city?
I think it's kind of
think
like
that's
saying
what
you
he
need a
meant.
public notary on something like that. I don't know if this is a real
I
necessary
think there's
burden.
one or more CPAs on the city payroll already.
Yeah.
Our goal is to make sure that the government is running efficiently in its current form, and I
Yes.
think that this just adds more hurdles to that doesn't really actually do anything for transparency.
We just tabled the CFO question earlier, so,
I'll
yeah.
go with Nick's on that
Okay.
one, too.
So next, any more?
Well, the last things I have, the list gets pretty short now. And we talked about this jump issue, this mechanism to ensure follow-through. We got that covered with Brian, right?
All right.
Okay. The last thing I had was this very minor, well, an easy thing is public comment times at the governing body meetings. I know the governing body has struggled with that. I'm on the planning commission. We struggle with that too. You have an agenda, you have people coming in, where do you put public comment, and do you put it at the first, the last, the middle? You can't please everybody all the time. The initial question is that something within the scope of our work?
We could always tell governing body, we recommend this order of your agenda. But again, I don't know if it's really anything to do with what we do other than we've received this comment. I don't think it's a bad recommendation, but I
Yeah.
guess I'll leave it to everybody else.
Does
to
it
decide.
really
We
have
can
anything to
suggest
do with
like
the charter?
reordering
I don't
it
think
once or
so.
twice a month, does it always have to be in the same order every month, or can we shake things up? And anyway, yeah, is that, because we're about
Yeah, what
out of
did I
time.
miss?
We're about out of time, so we all good?
We've got 10 minutes.
But does everybody else have
we
a
got
list?
10 minutes, Jim. We
We all
got
have
one,
a
two.
list?
We don't count.
Pretty much the same.
We all have a list, so,
Wrap this
yeah.
up.
We got one.
Because you asked us all to prepare a list, so what do you have?
I
There's
don't
nothing on my list that wasn't covered. already.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing on my list that wasn't covered
Okay.
already.
I think I'm good.
Okay. Champagne.
The only thing I would add is not the form of our governance, but how. I'm getting a lot of comments, and I got a lot of questions about why does the city manager do this way? Why is there assistance? We got so.
Maybe
just-
organizational.
Yes,
So maybe we need to put
organizationally.
something in the recommendations
Yes.
about how
to more
the structure
yes,
is
that's what people
organized.
are talking about, but they want the city manager. It's just they're got questions of how and how effective and why is it so expensive. And we
It's
know
expensive to
why.
run a government.
Right, and
Yeah.
like we know
Got you.
why.
Yep. Okay,
So that's all I had.
I got one thing. Everything else came up.
Yeah, it did.
Because we're all thinking alike. That's super cool. But the topic of communications was interesting. And our early presenter, Mr.
Honest?
Hannes, yes, as well. And I don't know if it dovetails or parallels into Spencer Duncan, his comment about the board's recommendations and using them. Is it a communication thing? I just spewed stuff. I'm confident there's policies, procedures, in place. Is it an issue where the information's there and the folks, the citizens don't know how to get it? Do they not want to get it? I hope that's not the case. I'm confident it's not the case. Where am I going with this? I mean, I know we're on TV, we're on YouTube, it's on the internet. You go to the website, you can pull up, I've done it, a number of times, pulled up recordings of meetings and whatnot, to show my kids, my students, to watch my spouse in front of council meetings. I've done it before, but in my last little bit was, there are some folks that are on the fringes of the communication. I put down elderly, homeless, folks, low socioeconomic status that don't have the means for access for communication. Anyway, on the fringes, that's my word I put, on the fringes. Is there something out there? Is that something in our scope to take a look at? Or does it dovetail into Brian's?
System fault.
Yeah.
I think if
Or not?
we all want perfect
Yes.
governing body members that listen to every comment made, and that, we want that. I don't know if we can tell a governing body that you need to listen to certain people more, or take action on every survey that's out there. We've got a lot of citizen commissions and committees that do a lot of surveys that are meant to provide input to the city
Feedback,
council, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets heard and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that's the point of elections. I don't know if we're in the game of telling them who to listen to and who not to, and if the community doesn't
Okay.
like it, then
Okay.
I just don't know if it's in our purview. I think maybe that's the short way
That's
of
what
saying that.
I needed to hear that.
Well, because recommendations is just that, I always keep that in mind. Like, you can survey, we can recommend all we want. They're not obligated to any
100%.
recommendation. That's
Yeah.
not, it's a
Yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah,
But
100%.
looking at what you said, is it accessible? And I believe it is, because you just named, there is no more platforms. And so our job would be, is there some kind of communication that they're not providing that is hindering their governance? And it's not.
Okay.
It's not. I
All
don't see
Thank
any
you.
other way
Okay,
what else
All right.
we could add.
awesome. Okay.
Well, it is an important point, and I've
It is very
struggled
important.
with this in the past too, because we have a surprising and I think really impressive list of ways to communicate if you're adept with any level of technology at all. But there are folks, I'm not very good at it. That'll shock you all to hear, okay? I'm not good at technology, but I have a spouse who is. So, but there are folks that are out there, and they're marginalized, and they stay marginalized because they cannot communicate. They cannot make the contact. The city has a lot of outreach efforts, beyond the electronic communication, but the extent to which people are aware of those services, how they become aware of them, I do not know.
But Jim, if you think about it, it's not all electronic. You can come in person. There's mailing, there's email, like it's not all electronic. So, I mean, I'm not being funny. If you are not technology savvy, you got 2 feet or a car and you can go to a meeting. Like you can talk, there's phones. Even if you don't do an email, you can call everybody. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know what more we could do to
Spencer
make
Duncan
it more
has
available.
monthly, what do they call them, like town hall meetings or something?
Yeah.
He's over at Fairlawn
At
Plaza once a
Fairlawn
month,
Plaza.
so y'all answered my issues, and I'm good.
Well, we know the city's got great communications staff that
Yeah,
puts
we
this
do.
out in every way possible.
Love
But
you, Dan.
Okay.
no, I mean, you're right. There's a level to where we'd love to make a perfect government with perfect public servants, but at some point,
The human factor.
we can't do anything
Yeah.
about.
like Connie said, voting is important.
Elections matter.
Well, one other thing,
important.
just real quickly, is like the city council members, I think each one of them have their own
They do.
electronic communication, but it wasn't that long ago that they didn't mail out. You had mailers, and I'm sure it was costly, but you'd have mailers to your district, and
Right.
you'd love seeing those. I mean, I like seeing those, you know? But it's a relic of the past now.
Like the paper.
Okay.
You guys,
Yeah,
we did it.
so
We
exactly.
finished a meeting on time.
Oh my
This is
gosh, y'all.
fantastic.
We got a minute
So,
left? I think we got
yeah.
a minute left.
Okay, well, not yet. Anything else that's, anything on the list, anybody's list?
I just have one thing to add. We did not vote on the dates that we had set, so we need to do that really quick.
Somebody throw it out.
We have 1 minute to vote.
Come on,
Okay.
somebody throw it out, somebody
I
say it.
move,
You want to vote to,
For this,
Yes.
We have
setting
the
the meeting
motion
dates
and
for
I move
May.
that the next 4 meetings, May 7th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., May 21, 6 to 8 p.m., June 4, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and June 11th,
Tentatively.
tentatively 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. I move that.
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you,
Motion to
guys.
adjourn? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Oh, okay.
I
Second.
motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. We did it.
Thank you.
We did it.